Good morning. I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to the Quilt Show and Dee's Saturday Sampler. Hopefully where you are is a beautiful day today, regardless of the weather. So this week we're going to take a look at some blocks that were sent to me from others. Some of you guys are doing great stuff out there and it's wonderful. And so I'll show you several of those that I got emails on so that I was able to share those with you this morning. Good morning, Pat. Welcome. And then we're going to get into two blocks that we're doing today. Hi, Marilyn. And so this is what I did today is I'm a polka dot fan, and if a quilt has a polka dot in, it's just a happier quilt. And so I've been thinking about how I can do polka dots or something like that to give it an idea. And so this week while I was away for my retreat in Michigan that I do, I kind of came up with how I might get that done. And the hardest part of it for me was the math. It's always about the math. The math is hard, at least in my world. And so let's take a look. Good morning, Bonnie and Melanie, Janice, Denise. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you guys are here. Truly, 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 it is an honor that you show up. So the first one that I want to show you is Karen sent me these blocks. So you can see she's off to a great start. It's going to be a pretty colorful quilt with this. I can't wait to see what your background sashing is going to be. So there's Karen's list. And then next we have Kathy's blocks. And they just look so different depending on, the fabrics and all of that. But what a great job that you've done. Very much so improv on that. So, and then we have some blocks from Debbie. And she's going red, white, and blue, which I think is very fun. And that's going to make a great patriotic wall hanging. So thank you for sharing your pictures and your work. It's lovely and doing great stuff out there. All right, so as I was working, I realized that I was doing a lot with fractions. And so as I was planning for today, because I do it very much like I'm hoping that you are, as you watch the show or you think about your blocks or maybe what you want to do a little bit differently, I just come up with something. So it is very improv in my head. I do play with it. I do work at it a little bit so that I can, share it with you on the show. But I decided to do a fraction today for the first block, and then I'll show you the polka dots. So let's take a look at my table. And so a fraction has a numerator and a denominator. And so I'm going to sew these two together, and I'm going to sew these two together, and then start kind of whacking these apart and see what happens and get my 4.5-inch block. So I want some green on either side of this block, and I wanted to add that color. So I don't have very big pieces. In fact, they're leftover pieces from, the other blocks that I made is really what they are. And again, with the improv, I can't help myself. I pretty much sew a 1/4-inch seam. But if your blocks aren't really matching up, it's really okay not to have a perfect 1/4-inch seam and completely sew it down with that. So let me get my leader and ender. I do like to work with leaders and enders because it just keeps those bird nests. I don't have to think about holding on to my threads. So just makes for a little bit smoother job there. All right. So pressing again, sinking the threads into the fabric running the side of my iron down to get that nice press seam. Doing the same thing this way, running that down. No ironing, just pressing. All right. So this is what I've got so far. So I think I'm going to take my rotary cutter and let's just cut through that, and we'll sew then these two sides together, and I may give it a little bit of curve that I cut with the rotary cutter as well, and get those sewn. And on this one, I deliberately sewed just a little bit crooked. I don't know if it's going to actually even show up when I get to that point. But we'll see. Or maybe just look wonky enough that just to be fun. All right, so I've given myself a little bit of room for trimming so that I get my, my 4.5 inch, my improv that's not quite 100% what some may consider improv. Like I said, the definitions are, varied and wide, and I think it's whatever you want your improv to be. All right, so I've got my numerator completed, and I think I want to give it just a bit of a trim, and I'm simply going to do that with my rotary cutter. And now I'm going to sew that top part to my next piece of fabric. Then I'm going to do exactly the very same thing to my denominator part of my fraction block here. I think that's what I'm going to call it. Otherwise, it's simply, using up scraps that I've had left over from other, other pieces. And let's alrighty. You can put certainly more pieces in between than two. You could put maybe one on the top or one on the bottom, make one really fat. This block is really however you decide you want it to play out in your world, and how wide you want them to be. All of that is really truly left up to you, and what you want to accomplish with it. So I think think I'm gonna. And you know what? This doesn't work. I love it. You know, I can't seem to find a way not to make mistakes. Let me grab my friend here. And the way I like to, to take out ripping is I do about every fourth or fifth line. Because I can do it fairly quickly, and then just pull one thread from the back side, and I have that off of there. If I was doing, those crumb blocks, I could have just left it that way and sewed on a different side. So that, that's another thought, using that whole, crumb quilting idea for sewing the blocks together. And very quickly here we're going to have another block completed. So I want to set the, the seam. And now I have the bottom to that, and I want to sew this on. Get that pretty close to the same length, and just so I don't waste thread, I'm going to cut these ends off a little bit so they're out of my way. As you can see, the way this is, I didn't trim it again. So the one side is going to be quite a bit shorter in terms of width when I open that up. And it wants to lay that way, so we'll let it. Even though I might have to change that because it may overlap in the back. And then I've got my block, and I want to measure it at 4.5, and and here we go. All right. The only thing about trimming when I'm sitting down is that I can't see that top part at all. So I do appreciate being able to stand and do my cutting, because I feel that the cut is better when you can see all the way around. Because here on the bottom, I can see it and I can line it up and get and I already noticed one thing that I'm going to have to do some correcting on, and I think that's part of the whole process of improv stuff, is that I'm missing a portion there. And so let's and basically I've got 4.25, so I must have not seen that. So I'm simply going to put that across, And we'll sew that up. And I want to trim some of that excess off. And I certainly could have gotten another piece of fabric, done something else, but that one was laying there. And now I can go back and retrim all of that to my 4.5-inch block size. And I'm going to go rogue there and do that. All right, so there is my fraction block for today. Again, put it together however you would like to on that. And now let's take a look at the questions, see if we have any questions over here. Vicky, it says, so what are you making? I am making an improv quilt where I'm just coming up with the blocks and the ideas each week before the class. And here is a picture of, I'll go back and show that again. Oh, it's sideways. But each of these are 4.5-inch squares, and these are what we're making each week for the improv blocks. And you certainly could change it up any way you want to, but I'm hoping that you will kind of stretch yourself outside the box. And we're going to put a border on it. This border on the picture is plain. We're going to do something different, and each of you can do what you want with it, because that's part of this whole improv thing. So anyway, I am so sorry. Anyway, there is our final kind of thing that we're working for. And I'm hoping that you're having a lot of fun with it. From what I hear from those of you who are talking and sending emails and comments and things like that, it sounds like you are, so hopefully that will continue. So I was playing around with sizes, and to get a 4.5-inch and a 9 patch was where me and math were having a bit of a difficulty. But I figured it out pretty close. And so a couple of things that I want to say. This is my block that I came up with. And so it's a 9 patch. And then I simply cut out free-handed circles and put in the middle. This is stabilizer on the back. And I wanted to try something to see if I liked it. I may go back to my scribble freeform. So I was simply going to hand stitch around each of these circles, and I kind of like it. I'm going to live with it for a minute or two. I may practice with freeform stitching with black thread, just go quickly around a couple of times each block and see if I like that better. You could blanket stitch, you could straight stitch around each one of these, whatever you wanted to do would be terrific. But this is simple raw edge applique on here. But let's talk about getting these blocks together. I use double-sided fusible for you know, the circles, putting those on the squares. But the first thing I did was make the 9 patch because I wanted to make sure my circles fit inside each of the squares. So I worked a bit and I came up with 1 7/8 will give me pretty close to what I want. And so when you put your ruler down on here and get it all lined up at 1 7/8, one of the things that is going to be helpful for you in getting this completed is to get it to the half mark of the 4 1/2. You really need to keep your 1/8 inch line, you know, if you're whatever ruler you're working on, off the fabric. All right, because you want that, and then sew with a scant inch, 1/4 inch, and it all works out. If somebody can come up with the math better than that, but that's probably the easiest that I found to cut, and it really comes out pretty close to that, and just shaving off a hair or two or a thread length width is great. So 1 7/8 is the number, and so that's the square you cut. Sew them in rows of 3, sew those 3 rows together, and put that aside. And then there's the double-sided fusible, and you know, use whatever brand that you want. My newest and most favorite, because it is so lightweight and it feels the best to me, there's no stiffness to it, is the Quilter Select double-sided, and I have run out, so this is not that. So this is not what it would look like. It's a plain backing sheet. But just to get an idea of what I wanted to, the size that I thought I would need on a 1 7/8 inch, I discovered that when I finished my Aurifil, and I went the little bit duller side. What's going to come off here first? All right, so we have to do that. I, you know, use a pen of some kind, but I simply made a circle so that I would know what I wanted to, how big I wanted the circle to be, just to give me a clue. Then I, you know, cut out actually, I just did that kind of backwards. I put my, you know, unsized, so these were, I cut my squares originally before I put them on and I laid them all up on the back side of my double-sided fusible, and then I drew my circles in the center of those, and then fuse them to the back side. Let me get rid of some of this so I can fuse that. And you know, to keep your iron clean, I'm using a piece of parchment paper. Use parchment paper, applique pressing sheet, whatever, and iron that. Hot iron, no steam, at least on for this fusible that I'm using. Yours might be a little bit different, I don't know. And I let it cool a little bit more than I did, because if you don't let it cool, this is what you get, that gummed up stuff on there. But for the sake of, and you know what, when you use a friction pen, it goes away when you iron. Kind of the beauty of it. So now that I have, you know, a circle that I know is going to be close to the size that I need, I'm simply going to free-handed cut that out. All right, and then to my, you know, 9 patch, I want to take the back off of this, and there's several different ways you can catch a corner. You can take a pin and run, you know, a mark through it, whatever. However, it's easiest for you to get that second piece off. And then you can put that into the center of your block. I, you know, laid them all out first before I actually even cut them so that I would know which looked best on which. And then once you get those all done, you sew them, you know, press them down. And then you have your raw edge applique on your 9 patch. Now, if you want to do your blanket stitch, your straight stitch, your, you know, if you want to scribble around those, however you want to deal with your raw edge applique, you'll need a stabilizer. So I have a stabilizer that I put on the back side of this so that I could do whatever I wanted. I had already put, because I was thinking that I was going to do, you know, the scribble around, and so I had put the stabilizer on so that I could do that, but I didn't have the right thread that my machine enjoys, so I need to, if I decide to do that, I need to go and get that. So those are some supplies that you might think about beforehand. And so stabilize it before you sew that on, and the thinner and the nicer the stabilizer is, so that you can either wash it out, cut it out, or the kind that you can actually even leave in would be pretty wonderful on that. So these are the 2 blocks for today. So hopefully you can see both of those. And this extra little strip that I have, you don't have to have that, or you could have more, or whatever you wanted to, because it's kind of fun. And that's part of the, you know, this whole unplanned improv, planned improv. So circles, you know, you can make bigger circles and put it onto your background, onto your fusible if you wanted to, and then once you have all 9 of them onto your fusible, press them all down and then cut them out. And you can cut them out a little smaller, because as you can see, that's definitely too big for that spot. So however, you know, works best in your brain, go for it. Let me see if there's any questions. Okay, Kristen has put up where you can watch this again. You know, the pressing sheet, apple stick, all of that. So that is there. All right, I don't think there's any other questions, but again, if you have questions, go to the forum. If you or go to my email address, or if you are later and go back on YouTube and watch it, there's a place to ask your questions, and I try to get to all those questions each week and answer them for you. So next week there's going to be 2 more blocks. I'm going a little crazy for next week's block, one of them, and so that should be kind of fun. And I hope you have an absolute wonderful week, and have fun making polka dots. And they will make you happy. That's what polka dots in my world do. They make us happy. So have a happy week. Blessings to all of you.